Hey everyone, my name is Anna. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm exploring the topic of introverted sensing, which is considered to be the tertiary function in the INFP's function stack. In other words, the third most preferred function for the INFP type. As I talked about in a previous video, the function stack of any type creates a pattern of opposing and complementing functions that work together in a hierarchy of preference, and ideally, if these functions are well developed, they create a balance of perspectives and cognitive aptitudes within an individual. So in the function stack pattern, the tertiary function opposes the auxiliary function, it complements the inferior function, and it harmonizes with the dominant function. And a pattern that I started to see emerging as I was researching this topic is that the tertiary function, when it's well developed and well balanced, seems to act as a kind of assistant type role to the other functions because it's relatively harmonious and easy to use, and it doesn't take over our focus and awareness the way that our dominant function does. But on the flip side, when it's not used with equilibrium and power, it can become a bit of a crutch, a bit of an easy way out because it's relatively easy to use. But what is the introverted sensing function? The sensing function is the function that interacts with life from a physical perspective, so responding to sensory information and responding with the senses, and it's considered a perceiving function, which means that it's taking in and gathering and exploring information as opposed to making decisions or forming conclusions as the judging functions do. Introverted sensing means that the focus of the sensory responses is turned inward, so having a keen awareness of our internal physical state, or else our attention and awareness is turned towards the internalized memories of sensory experiences that we've already lived, so recollecting or reliving past sensory experiences. An obvious benefit of introverted sensing is that it can create an awareness of what works and what doesn't work for us on a subjective sensory level, meaning we can create an attuned and sensitive relationship with our own physical responses. And because introverted sensing also stores a lot of information about past sensory experiences, it creates a repertoire that can serve as a reference point to compare new sensory information to. So a lot of introverted sensing is focused towards the recollection of past sensory experiences, as opposed to extroverted sensing that is focused on the sensory experiences of the here and now. The way that I experience this in my life is that when it comes to external sensory input, a little goes a really, really long way. Because with only the smallest of external sensory stimulation, I can create a very rich and textured internal experience based on the many layers of subtle responses I can tune into, as well as the many layers of connections I can make with my repertoire of sensory memories. So basically, an entire sensory adventure can take place within me with only the smallest of external sensory information. So how can we use our tertiary function of introverted sensing to assist us and avoid using it as a crutch? Firstly, introverted sensing resembles introverted feeling in its inward-focused orientation. So it can actually serve as an easily accessible resting place for our attention, tuning into our physical awareness, tuning into our internal senses can actually take some of the pressure off of our feeling function, bring some attention away from being in the feels. In my life, I use constant physical movement and physical exertion as a way both to channel my feeling nature, but also as a way to bring my attention to my physical awareness and give my emotional awareness a break. So finding ways to bring our attention to our physical body can actually bring us some equilibrium and calm and bring some balance and some respite to FI. So introverted sensing, otherwise known as SI, can bring us a lot of relief. But as with all things comforting, the danger is in falling into a comfort zone rut. which in MBTI terms is known as the dominant tertiary loop. In our case, the FI-SI loop, which basically means looping between being in the feeling function and finding relief from that in the senses over and over again without adding any expansion or growth or vitality or strength into the mix, which can lead to feelings of powerlessness and even depression because it's putting a cap on our aliveness, since aliveness ultimately usually has an edge of discomfort to it. I think avoiding this loop comes down to using the comfort zone to regenerate instead of suppress. It might be a really trite or simplistic thing to say, but being truthful with ourselves that staying in the comfort zone is probably not going to bring us a lot of empowerment and vitality is a necessary first step to breaking the loop. Practically speaking, we need to engage with the riskier auxiliary function of extroverted intuition, or the challenging and uncomfortable inferior function of extroverted thinking, if we really want to generate power and strength in our lives. I think over time many of us come to know this, and we use our FI-SI comfort loop as a genuine way to find downtime and to treat ourselves when we really need healing and relief and rest. Introverted sensing can also help to bring balance to our auxiliary function of extroverted intuition, or NE. Since NE is an open-ended, divergent, possibility-seeking function, it can have trouble narrowing down its focus or grounding its ideas. SI creates an internal repertory of sensory preferences, so it's much more inclined towards the familiar, the tried and true, than NE, who's always seeking the new. Therefore, SI is more prone to creating consistency, creating routines and habits that can preserve its preferences and honor its sensitivities. We can use SI to narrow down the possibilities and new information found through extroverted intuition into something that can be incorporated into our physical lives. FI will let us know if something aligns with our values, but SI will help us refine it into our physical reality. The risk is that there's a tug of war between NE and SI, with NE insisting on newness and openness and SI insisting on familiarity and repetition. But the way I see it, introverted sensing can act as a helpful assistant to extroverted intuition if we use our awareness to keep it in a state of growth and movement, like an internal garden of information that can incorporate the new and ground it and refine it into growth that is in harmony with our being and our physical realities. In the lake imagery that I used in the previous videos, I saw the sensing function as the various textures and life forms that exist in and around the lake. So the plants, the rocks, the sand, the mud, the animals that are all part of the lake. And I like to see introverted sensing as an ecosystem of life forms that create a sensory landscape deep within the lake. And a healthy introverted sensing experience would be cultivating that ecosystem like a living, breathing internal garden that can serve as a grounding force for our values and ideas and visions, but that isn't so self-preserving that it stops moving and growing and changing. Thank you for watching. I would love to hear what your experience is with introverted sensing, and I will see you next time for a video on our auxiliary function of extroverted intuition.